You investors in hate, you Saddams and you Bushes, you Bin Ladens and snakes, you billionaire bullies, you're a globalized curse. You put war on the masses and then you clean out the purse. And that's how it's done. War after war. You old feudal parasites, you just sacrifice the poor. You got the cutting edge weapons, but your scam's still the same as it's been since
Buffy St. Marie, a terrific show, music that we have decided to adopt for our theme music. If you've just joined us, this is Heroes and Patriots, a program about national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Our next guest is David Swanson. David is returning to us. He has recently written the piece, What Does the Pelosi Posse Want? And we're going to be talking about her latest statement this morning and other things. David Swanson, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You bet. It's been a while since we've had you on the program. I think the last time was when the Charlottesville activity and riots were going on, and a lot has happened in those 2 years or year and a half. And today we want to speak with you to get your perspective on the impeachment inquiry, and now articles being drawn up as called by Nancy Pelosi this morning. In September, you wrote an article, For the First Time in My Life, I'm Against Impeaching the President. Explain what you mean.
Yeah, well, it has been a while. Charlottesville is still here. The monuments are all still standing,
Correct.
Unfortunately. Nancy Pelosi, if you glance at a headline, you get the impression of, expanding impeachment beyond just Ukraine-gate. And you start to celebrate, oh, wow, they're actually getting serious. They're going after Trump for his financial corruption, violation of the emoluments clauses, taking kids away from families, abusing immigrants, locking them up, abusing the pardon power, pardoning hideous crimes, inciting racist violence, waging illegal wars, threatening nuclear wars, declaring emergencies explicitly to violate the law, and on through all of the quintessentially impeachable offenses that are documented, proven, public acts bragged about. And now maybe they're getting serious. Maybe they want to get a conviction, get this guy out of there, make a better world. And then you read the first paragraph of what Nancy Pelosi actually has had to say. And of course, what she means by more than just Ukraine is Russia.
Right.
The whole pretense that Ukraine-gate is somehow piled on top of a successful Russia-gate, rather than being, as of course it is, a cheap substitute for a failed Russia-gate that they tried to prove for years, and which of course has fueled a new Cold War and militarism and normalized hatred of Russians and militarization of countries like Ukraine, with billions of dollars of free weapons from the United States in the hands of Nazis, among others. And it's bad for the country. It's bad for the world. It's bad for the impeachment process. It's aimed at avoiding a conviction. It's an attempt to make Russians look bad, Democrats look militarist, Trump look bad, Joe Biden look good as his victim and enemy and supposedly most frightening opponent. I don't think it's succeeding in all of those things, but this is the effort. It's to avoid an impeachment and conviction and removal from office. It's to go forward with an impeachment as a public relations stunt that will make Trump look bad in the eyes of those who believe in Russiagate, in whose eyes he already looked bad.
Right. And so do you feel that the Republican Party is, I don't want to know if I want to say justified, but is correct in their resistance to agree with the president to withhold witnesses, to not turn over documents, emails, etc.? Do you feel that's the right way to go on the Republican side? Because as we know, impeachment is written as a bipartisan activity.
Well, it isn't. The Constitution doesn't mention parties. They didn't exist. They weren't envisioned. They could have been quite easily predicted, and they arose quite swiftly in the history of this country, but they're not mentioned. Their existence isn't there. There were supposed to be three branches of government, and they weren't the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and Fox News. They were Congress, the White House, and the judiciary. And the Congress was first and foremost with the most power, and it was to have the power of impeachment. And clearly obstructing an impeachment is an impeachable offense itself, and one of the articles of impeachment passed by the Judiciary Committee against Richard Nixon was simply for refusal to cooperate with the impeachment. I don't think the Republican Party is justified in existing, so maybe I'm not the person to ask, but I certainly don't think the Republican Party is justified, and I don't know whether it's the party or the White House or Donald Trump, but I don't think anyone is justified in refusing to cooperate with a congressional investigation. I don't think you or I would get away with it for a second.
Right.
I think the rule of law ought to be upheld even in a country where you have to squint and hunt to find any vestiges of it. It ought to be upheld. I also think Ukrainegate is well enough established for an indictment, which is what an impeachment is. Go and have a trial in the Senate, see if you can prove it. My concern is why not throw into that indictment some articles of impeachment that you don't have to prove because they're already proved, because they're documented public acts. Such as thousands of conflicts of interest in financial matters through Trump's properties and investments, unprecedented in the history of presidential sleaze and corruption.
Emoluments,
Blatant violation of both emoluments clauses in the Constitution, such as pardoning a racist sheriff who was putting Latino immigrants in what he called a concentration camp with electrical wire, many of whom ended up dead, pardoning the killing of prisoners in wars, pardoning the slaughtering of innocent civilians in wars, telling border guards to violate the law to build a wall on the border of Mexico and promising to pardon any crimes, telling for that matter participants in campaign events to beat up protesters and he would take care of their legal bills, openly inciting racist violence, declaring emergencies explicitly in order to spend money on such things as racist border walls in violation of the law, having been forbidden those monies by the Congress of the United States, blatantly failing to prepare for or respond to hurricanes that devastated, in particular, the people of Puerto Rico, engaging in numerous illegal wars inherited from his predecessor, escalating most of them, dramatically escalating the drone murder operations around the world, threatening nuclear war on North Korea and Iran. I mean, these are public statements, keeping U.S. troops in Syria explicitly and exclusively to steal the oil of Syria. This is a public statement on a silver platter that the Democrats reject. Right, backing coups in Venezuela and Bolivia and elsewhere. I mean, this is openly declaring himself to be above the rule of law and violating laws openly and recklessly. I mean, this is who we're talking about.
I mean, you feel the Democrats have just turned a blind eye to these things? I thought they've been very critical of Trump and his behaviors.
Well, they love to be critical. I mean, everybody loves to be a war opponent while funding wars and allowing wars to continue. Everybody loves to be a critic. Gerald Nadler, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee over the past few years, has publicly criticized Donald Trump to the extent of himself acknowledging that a number of the offenses I just started listing were impeachable offenses. But has he introduced articles of impeachment? Has he held a vote in his committee? Of course not. He does not do the bidding of his knowledge or his conscience or his constituents in New York or of the population of the United States. He does the bidding of Nancy Pelosi.
I'm finding that the impeachment inquiry and the issues that they're bringing up are obscuring the real issues that you are talking about. They're not talking about issues other than impeachment. And there are so many of these other issues that you are bringing up that are just lying by the wayside. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like you say, these are things the Democrats support. And
this is Jordan, our engineer, by the way.
So yeah, I'm finding, and like you say, the escalation of the Cold War with Russia, they're getting the left to move to the center by having to defend the institutions that we have traditionally have had grief with. And now we are the defenders of the military, of the intelligence operations, and they've shifted the roles, the traditional roles, and they don't talk about issues, period. And all those are obscured. But they talk about emollients, but like you say, they're not bringing those up as articles of impeachment when those clearly are. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions to be asked for sure.
Well, I agree somewhat. I mean, a lot of the things I mentioned, and I could go on through dozens and dozens of them, and we've drafted 25 articles of impeachment that people can read at rootsaction.org and even purchase as a book there at rootsaction.org. A lot of them are things that Congress can do one and only one thing about: impeach the president. And so it's not as if these are issues they should be slaving away at and are neglecting because they're occupied with impeachment, which is a dumb idea and didn't work for Clinton and so forth. I mean, when you tell the president you are forbidden to have any money to go and build your wall, and the president declares a phony emergency to take that money and go and build that wall, what does Congress do? What does the Constitution allow the Congress to do in response to a president who blatantly violates the will of the Congress?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I am for impeachment, and I, as a matter of fact, quoted the professor who said, if this is not impeachable offense, nothing is. I quoted that to my son over 2 months ago in a text. So I'm definitely see that it's the impeachable offenses are a mile long.
Well, and just remember, the Pentagon lost $25 million to, I think it's million or billion, to help construct this wall because, quote, we were in a crisis at the border of Mexico. That money was approved by Congress and needs to be was earmarked, I should say, and appropriated, and Trump just wanted to, shove it down to the border. There's so many things. So your point is, David, that there are all these things that have happened, all these illegal, if you will, things that have happened. Why now impeachment?
Yeah, well, for one thing, I am in favor of just about anybody taking just about any sum of money away from the Pentagon. I don't think $25 million is a sum the Pentagon would even notice. But it's the blatant illegality and violation of the will of Congress to do something militaristic and racist and destructive with that money that I object to. Why impeachment? I think because they backed themselves into this corner. They rode this Russiagate pony for years, convincing without any evidence a huge chunk of the U.S. public and a huge chunk of the Democratic Party's constituency that Trump and Russia had somehow stolen the last election. We now hear, as of yesterday, Hillary Clinton claiming that Bernie Sanders is also a Russian asset. Of course, shred of evidence. I mean, of course, we could see this coming for the past year and a half, right? But they drove everybody mad with this Russiagate insanity, with this notion that Trump was a slave of a foreign power and so forth, that they couldn't not do impeachment. And yet they couldn't figure out anything they had any substantial evidence for on Russiagate. And so in Ukrainegate fell in their laps, and they said, okay, we'll do Ukrainegate. We'll pretend it's Russiagate. We'll say Russia in every third breath. We'll pretend we're piling on Russiagate rather than substituting for it. And we'll move forward with this notion that Russia won the 2016 election and our hero Joe Biden will win the next one, which, of course, he is completely incapable of doing.
David, we have a caller. Caller, go ahead with your question for David Swanson.
Yes, I have something to. In the International Criminal Court, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, there is an appeal from an attorney, a group of attorneys, they're Americans, from the Center for constitutional rights, and it has to do with war crimes, American war crimes. And she represents two detainees from the Guantanamo Bay, and one has been there for 18 years. And she was able to gain jurisdiction because they're from Afghanistan and because they've been transferred to these different black ops sites where torture was going on. And Trump and Secretary of State Pompeo had gone and harassed and threatened the International Criminal Court to try to impede this process. And the lawyer, Catherine Graham, filed a complaint with the United Nations and is now before the court. And I'm unable to hear or see the video of it. I don't know if we're blocked because of this government. I put nothing beyond these tyrants who have so much to cover up. And but anyways, it's very important, and it's going on now.
David, can you respond?
Well, I cannot speak to the video failure issue, but I can speak to the crimes issue. There is absolutely no question that the United States has committed the crime of war in invading and attacking Afghanistan, and numerous so-called war crimes, bombing hospitals, shooting civilians, torturing and murdering prisoners, and on through almost the entire repertoire of war crimes in Afghanistan.
I'd like to say one other thing is also there's a not very known American law that while our military is misled into illegal and unlawful wars, and while American soldiers are killed during these invasions, that it is considered murder under the law. And attorney Vincent Bugliosi wrote a book, The Prosecution of George Bush for Murder, and it's up to the people of the United States to go after these war criminals and stop this. And we can lobby as private citizens with copies of our written statements hand-delivered to the offices of our representatives to abolish these war criminals from our military.
Thank you, caller. We have another caller waiting. Thank you, caller, for that comment and question. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
I just wanted to make a quick point that I am so happy for KMUD because we're having this kind of rigorous debate about this particular topic, and it is very far-reaching. It's going outside the box of what I hear on the mainstream media.
Correct.
And I just want to thank you all for making that happen, and thank KMUD for allowing it to happen. And I'll get off the air. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Yes, this is a lively discussion that does depart from what the mainstream media and cable news programs are putting out there. David, I know that you are part of a consortium of bloggers and anti-war activists with your website, warisacrime.org. You know, we have about 6 minutes left. I don't want to miss the fact that you have been part of this effort for many, many years, as many of your and our past guests have been. Could you briefly, before we conclude this show on impeachment, what that is about and what, at a grassroots level, our listeners can do?
Well, I would just second the caller's gratitude for the show, but object to the use of the term mainstream because of what's developed over these past several years. Recent polling by Data for Progress found that 16% of the public in the United States wants the current wars to continue. 84% want them ended. The corporate media wants every war to continue. We call them mainstream because they've beaten it into our heads that we should, but they aren't. They're corporate. They are a corporate corporate elite, does not answer to public opinion, does not permit the entry of a diversity of opinions, does not respond to public demand and energy. This is mainstream and should not, demean itself by calling it anything less. The opinions that are rejected as leftist in the United States on foreign policy and domestic priorities, saving the environment, treating healthcare and education as human rights, not commodities, ending wars, demilitarizing, making peace. These are overwhelmingly mainstream positions, and we think of ourselves as weak and helpless and marginalized and alternative because the corporate media tells us that, and we don't use responsible mainstream media like this sufficiently to tell each other how powerful we are, how many of us there are in this country and around the world. Sorry to not answer the question of what is impeachment. I think people have got a sense of what it is now. It's an indictment by the House of Representatives for whatever they feel like indicting a president for, and then you have a trial in the Senate. The reason I for the first time in my life, oppose impeaching a U.S. president is that they're doing it wrong. And they're creating hostility toward Russia with lies about Russia. They're creating worship of militarism, normalization of giving billions of dollars of free weapons to coup governments, erasing knowledge that there even was a coup in Ukraine or what it was about. And they're promoting the most disastrous. If there are two people in this country capable of losing an election to Donald Trump, they are Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. And this is a promote Joe Biden operation that is also putting Hillary Clinton back in the news, telling us that Bernie Sanders is a Russian asset.
Oh, my.
It's a disaster across the board. No matter how much I would love to see Donald Trump impeached and removed for serious reasons, because we don't have time to waste. The climate, the nuclear emergency, there are crises. We don't have another year of this fascist leader to spare. But this impeachment is not an effort to get rid of him.
Wow. It's just a few minutes remaining. I would like to put our listeners in touch with you, how they can follow your blog and your activism. Where might they do so?
Well, I do blog at warisacrime.org and at davidswanson.org, and people can contact me through davidswanson.org. I'm the director of worldbeyondwar.org, and people can go there. And I'm the campaign coordinator of rootsaction.org, and you can go there and find our articles of impeachment.
Thank you so much, David Swanson, for being our guest these last 30 minutes. And we do hope you'll come on and offer again your perspective on impeachment and other things.
Sounds great. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you so much. We have been listening in this second half hour to Mr. David Swanson. He is an American anti-war activist, blogger, and author. He co-founded the website After Downing Street, which we now know as warisacrime.org. That is our program for today. This is our last program of the 2019 year. We want to thank KMUD for hosting our show for the last year. I'll speak on John's behalf and myself. We thank Jordan, our engineer, and all of the board and staff and so forth who have made a home for us here at KMUD. We will return again in January, the first Thursday in January. Our program is always heard on the first Thursday of the month. We hope that you will stay tuned and listen to us as 2020 approaches. And we appreciate so much what the folks here have done for us. Again, just a reminder, this program will be archived on KMUD.org and on our program website. That is www.heroespatriots.org. This is Mary Massey wishing you and yours a very happy holiday season.
So that's the war racket. It's the war racket. It's the war racket. It's the war racket. You twisters of language. You creeps of disguise. Yeah, disinformation. It's like worms in your eyes. You privileged bankers. You gambler thieves. You profit on war. You think it's just less money in peace.